When you're at a trade show and you're showing people your product, you can see their facial expression. If they get really bored or they're not a fit for what you're showing them, they vote with their feet and they walk away. If they're really interested, they stick around and they ask a ton of questions, and you very quickly figure out what people are excited about and what they're not excited about.
Welcome to Virtually Live by Kaltura. Every week, we'll get into the latest and greatest in marketing, and specifically event marketing, audience engagement, and brand experience. To guide us through that, we've invited event professionals and marketing leaders from various industries. In this week's episode, Kaltura's EVP Platform and Growth, Zohar Babin, speaks with Datadog's CMO, Alex Rosemblat, about how Datadog conquered webinar fatigue with prime content at their targeted events. Let's go!
Hey, I'm Zohar Babin. I'm the EVP of Platform at Kaltura, and I'm coming to you virtually live from Tel Aviv.
I'm Alex Rosemblat. I'm the CMO at Datadog. I'm coming to you virtually live from New York City. We're just a couple blocks south of Times Square.
So, Alex, what would you characterize as top of mind for CMOs nowadays?
Ooh, top of mind is a lot. I mean, the world is kind of crazy right now. I think a lot of the things that for years and years and years, CMOs had relied on, are sometimes not available or they're just not working like they used to. CMOs, I think, have had to do a lot of adaptation and learning on the fly and trying new things out in a very accelerated time frame to be able to get the same results to their sales teams or to other parts of the company. And it's been really a crazy time. There's so many things that are top of mind. I think for marketers these days, I would say the most top of mind thing is how do you maintain the same level that was expected before with so much disruption, so many platforms and so many different things that you have to do in the world?
So how would you say, so there's kind of the world before COVID, the world after COVID, and some are now calling it kind of the new normal. What do you think? Are we back to normal? Are we in the new normal?
We're not back to normal. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it will be a new normal. I would say that it's probably more like three phases. There's pre-COVID. There was the very acute COVID phase, and now we're kind of in a step down. And it's the thing I think is that it's also uneven. Some countries in the world are a little bit more have many more COVID restrictions or COVID rules. Some have relaxed them. Some are going backwards. Some are going forwards. Especially for a CMO that's running in multiple geographies, it's a bit confusing. It can be a bit uneven to figure out, things that you can do in one geography are not working or are not available in other geographies. So I do think that, in some ways this is a weirder time because during the acute phase of the pandemic, certain things were just turned off completely. Like you couldn't even think about it. They were off the table. And now you have to, think, hey, is it going to happen here? Is it going to happen there? This thing gets rescheduled. It kind of messes up the calendar downstream. I think that another part of that is the implications for the labor force. At the great, I don't know if the great resignation is really the way that it should be called. I think of it more as the great musical chairs. But there's also a lot of people that, are maybe looking around, getting offers from other companies, moving to another company for another role, someone who comes in. So I think that almost every team has probably seen a fair amount of disruption also because the team and its composition keeps on changing. And even if you find someone with a similar experience and similar skill sets, you do have a lot of institutional knowledge about how to do things that walked out the door. Now that we're going back to live events, and live events are something that we're very good at and we do in a very particular way, we don't really have any veterans outside of the events team that puts on the event that knows how these things work. So, we had a lot of teams that would come in and support, and they're seeing this for the first time. And it used to be something that we had as a well-oiled machine, and that we had a lot of people from other departments that knew what their role was when they went to an event. And these are things that all of a sudden we have to train people on from scratch for real. And it's not just a few people at a time like it used to be from new hires. It's the whole team sometimes.
That has been one of the greatest challenges, I guess, for every company and every manager globally. Share a little bit about Datadog and what does Datadog do, what the size of the marketing group within Datadog. Give us some, so people have a bit of an idea of what are you guys about, and what are the types of marketing challenges that you guys have?
Sure. Datadog is a platform for monitoring and for security for modern applications. And that would be applications that are running on a cloud platform like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. Or if someone has a special on-premise setup where they've used a lot of advanced technologies to essentially replicate a lot of the technology that's available in the public cloud. Where we cover pretty much every base for a developer or for a site reliability engineer or for an InfoSec engineer. And the marketing team is about just over 100 people. We've got a ton of roles open. So, check out our hiring page because we're hiring a lot. And I would say that the challenges that we're facing are very much challenges of scale. The company has just grown by leaps and bounds in the past couple of years. We're in more geographies going at full scale in different parts of the world that we weren't before. We've rolled out tons of new products over the past 2 years. I think going into the pandemic, we might have had 6 or 7 products. Now we have like 15 or 16. And we've also announced betas for a couple of others that are going to be out at some point soon. So, all of a sudden a marketing team that was doing maybe a handful or so of products in a couple of parts of the world has to be able to do almost the entire world with 3 times as many products almost. So it's that kind of scale that we have to account for. And building a team that is able to be as good at the first couple of products, replicated 3 times over, is definitely an interesting challenge. It's something that we're working on right now. Hiring, as I mentioned before, is a big part of it, but then there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built. People have to take the things out of their brain and write them down, make templates, make guides, make onboarding, and be able to, the recruiting team has a very productive set of months and a ton of new people come in. You very quickly want to have them be able to do the same job for a different product or for a different part of the world that we've been doing for a long time very successfully in other areas.
When you think of the most impactful activities from a marketing perspective, and I assume ultimately you're measuring revenue, right, and impact on revenue, what would be the kind of the top 5 most impactful marketing activities and the areas where you're consistently seeing great results and you're continuing to kind of invest and innovate in those areas? Yeah.
For me, I think that there's concentric circles and the human connection is extremely important. I think that the best selling experience that anybody can have, and if people haven't tried it, I definitely recommend trying it out, is literally face-to-face, person-to-person. The equivalent of like going to a farmer's market and talking to the farmer that, pulled the whatever vegetable off the vine or out of the ground. You can see people's reactions to your merchandise. I think that the best analog of that for B2B business, for B2B software is trade shows. When you're at a trade show and you're showing people your product, you can see their facial expression. If they get really bored or they're not a fit for it, you're showing them, they vote with their feet and they walk away. If they're really interested, they stick around, they ask a ton of questions, and you very quickly figure out what people are excited about and what they're not excited about. That's like probably the bullseye right there. The next concentric circle out of that, and technology has enabled that, I think is really like a virtual experience. Maybe it's a small curated event that's happening virtually, which of course we did a lot of in the pandemic. Maybe it's a virtual trade show. I think there are some challenges with some virtual trade show platforms where like you don't get that kind of person-to-person interaction. It's more of like a one-to-many where some pre-recorded video is playing and a ton of people are watching that video at the same time. So I do think that some of that is missed. When we did our own virtual trade shows during the pandemic, we also strongly asked our sponsors, and we did it ourselves, to have a human being actively demoing in the virtual booth area because we didn't want to lose that person-to-person connection, or as much as you could get, through technological means. I think that the next concentric circle after that are digital demand gen programs where there's high intent. You make assumptions about who's going to come in, and you can keep on looking at the data to fine tune those assumptions about who is looking for something and are they reacting well to whatever you're telling them you have. And then probably I think that the last after that is more passive style banner ads or content syndication. Of course, that has its place, but you might not always know exactly why someone downloaded something. There's some funny stories I have from years ago when I was in the product marketing seat where like some campaigns that we set up, we didn't think through long and hard enough, and we ended up having like people's grandmothers downloading the asset because like the way that the wording had worked out, like people thought that it might be like a recipe or something. So I mean, like the further you get from that human connection, the harder it is to really understand who's coming and why they're interested.
So let's touch a little bit deeper on that virtual side of things. So there's the virtual, obviously, events, and then there's the in-person events. And recently we've been hearing a lot about this new concept of hybrid events. Where do you sit there? Where do you see the values and I guess the advantages and disadvantages of each type of event? And where do you see the market going towards?
Yeah, I think hybrid's going to be around for a long time. I think that both event types have pros and cons. I mean, the pros for an in-person event obviously is, it's what we're all kind of used to as human beings. You can gauge people's thoughts. You can make an experience that's all encompassing that will really make an impression. You also have people's captive audiences and they're in a room with you. The cons are obviously like you have to have it in a geographic location. People have to travel. People have to take time away for travel time. It's more expensive. Not everybody has the time or can afford it. You might have a smaller turnout. You have to also get your own people there. You have to work with a ton of vendors if it's a larger event for catering and for people moving and security. It's a huge undertaking.
And it sounds like almost on the virtual side of things, there's significant advantages to knowledge sharing, to maybe brand awareness, and reaching wider audiences of like people who can travel and things like that. But mostly it's around the educational aspect of sharing content and training people, sharing the knowledge. And so product demos and maybe certification videos, things like that would work better. And then on the in-person side, it sounds like more on the person-to-person relationships building side of things. And maybe you would even say, let's prioritize on the in-person side, the existing customers, and building up a tighter relationship. And then on the virtual side, try and reach as many newcomers as possible or increase our certification programs. Do you see the virtual space, for example, getting better in the future in the person-to-person relationship side of things? Where do you see this growing? Do you believe in the meta future, for example?
I mean, I sure hope so. I will say that when we started looking for a platform in 2020 for us to do our first big virtual trade show, it seemed like a lot of platforms had been underinvested in. We couldn't find any platform that we'd say, this has everything we want. And it didn't feel like the things that we were suggesting were like that unusual. No one had developed it. And I guess that virtual platforms like that just hadn't been sought after enough to have, the investment of people to sit down and actually knock those features out. I do remember that there was a fair amount of things with a big group of people. Like we wanted to be able to I'll give you an example of a thing that we wanted to do that it didn't seem like there was any platform that could do it. We had the ability to ask a couple of questions of what people were interested in, what they did in their day-to-day work, and we wanted to be able to do a tailored agenda. Of course, they could go to any session that they wanted to, but we wanted to have a recommendation engine that said, based on the things that you filled out in your, during the registration process about your interests or what you're working on, these are the sessions we think you should go to. We couldn't find, at least in 2020, a single platform that allowed us to make like a customized set of recommendations for subset of users. So like we had to send it out via email, but like what we would have wanted was 15 minutes before the next set of sessions saying, hey, there's these 3 sessions happening in 3 different stages. Out of these 3, we recommend you go to this one based on what you said. And we were ready to build the algorithms behind like the recommendations, but we didn't have a real way to push the recommendations to the people so that they would be meaningful.
Let's talk about the angle of the participant and the angle of the sponsor, which is something that has been talked a lot about when it comes to in-person events. But then when virtual came, it was more about the relationship between the organizer and the participants. And then the sponsors were normally just kind of another digital campaign or something like that. Where do you see this is going?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the organizer, and the organizer has two areas I think to be able to tweak. Number one is the platform, and the platform that they select is just not very flexible. Even if they want to do something, they really can't. So again, as a sponsor to an event, you don't really have any kind of say into what platform the vendor is going to choose. So you just have to hope that they choose something that's got some level of flexibility. But then I would say the other side of it is actually on the vendor, and if they do have a platform that has some ability to customize, if they, some of the vendors that we have worked with that have put on events have been very open to making changes as much as they could based on the platform. And when we made some changes, like the event was great for us. And then some have been extremely, kind of like, this is the program and this is the program and this is how we're going to do it. And they're not willing to hear us out and to make any changes, or maybe they just can't because of the platform. And, we have had a number of virtual events that have been absolute duds and we won't go back to.
What do you think marketers should be measuring during their events, and what should be shared with sponsors versus what maybe potentially also be shared with the participants themselves? Yeah,
I'm personally not a believer at all in quote unquote awareness. I know that a lot of people swear by it. I mean, look, I'm so easily distracted. Like if you think that I saw your like banner or something, I probably didn't, and it wouldn't have permeated. And if I don't know what your company does, like it's going to go in one eye and out the other. So I'm not a big believer in that. Of course, in marketing speak, you call them leads. I feel like we should just call them people met. But I think that the real KPI is how many people did you meet, and having met a person where you didn't learn about them and they didn't learn about you. Once again, it's not all that different from seeing someone's banner for awareness and it not making an impression. So, something that we definitely harp on is we want to sit down, we want someone to see the demo, we want to try to interact with them if possible in a live event or in a virtual event. And, with lead capture, of course, you can say that. And if someone has some specific questions, we hope that someone actually writes down what the question is. So when they follow up, they're like, hey, you had this question, let me help you out with that. But again, getting a bunch of random names of people that visited your booth and you don't know why they were there, what they were looking for, is really not helpful. And when we've gotten data dumps like that from a vendor of a virtual event, I mean, it's probably not an event we're going to go back to.
If you're trying to aim for, let's say, a brand like Datadog probably attracts, hundreds of thousands of people for a virtual event, what would you try and measure your salespeople in terms of, the impact that they had during the event?
Well, I mean, if it's our own event, we have a large amount of topics to cover for sessions or for other material, it's very easy to see someone's path through the topics and know what they were interested in. And we can also see if they stuck around for a long time. So that becomes pretty obvious. If we're a sponsor, we really want to interact and talk with those people. So, I mean, nothing gets better than saying like, yeah, this person went through a demo and, maybe even the person that was giving the demo wrote down a note and said, so-and-so is interested in solving this kind of problem. But I mean, we're really trying to get to that person-to-person connection as much as possible.
What are some tips? What do you suggest fellow marketers to think about, and how should they plan for the next 12 months?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of very ominous headlines in the news about, a potential downturn coming up. I've sold through 2 downturns, and let's put it this way, I didn't feel much of a difference in terms of selling volume. I think that what you're trying to sell for is different. We've been in a hugely expansionary market. I mean, what is it? Like probably the longest expansionary market in the history of like recorded economics or something like that for the past like decade or 12 years or however long it's been. I think a lot of people in the workforce for over a decade, they don't know anything but just growth. The thing is that if people start getting pulling back and not investing as much, people are looking for efficiency. They're looking for cost savings. Selling them tools that will save them money that can become a pretty hot business. I think it really depends on everyone's product, but taking a look at what you might have had as an expansionary set of use cases, turning that around to be a set of efficiency or cost saving things you can do with the product if you do it successfully and the product can do it, and maybe this is more for the marketer to tell their product person, hey, do you have anything that would work in an economy in a downturn where people are trying to cut costs and save and be more efficient and do more with less? But if you do have those capabilities, and maybe it's just something that you never thought to highlight, from my own experience of working with products that could do that during downturns, you get a lot of business also.
Go virtual. In person is expensive.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and look forward to meeting you again next time I can do in person.
All right. It's good talking to you, Zohar. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alex Rosemblat and Zohar Babin, for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in. Join us again next week when we talk to Alvio Barrios, Cisco's SVP Customer Experience.